designing an evaluation of serious games for young haemato-oncological patients, which is quite a mouthful. So, concerning mobile health, there are lots of apps, of course, in the app stores, like millions of them already. And of course, they are concerned with all kinds of sicknesses and diseases and problems and health concerns. Here are just a couple of them concerning physical problems, physical sickness, and mental problems, mental sickness, well-being, prevention. In our case, in this project, we focused about an area that is quite concerning. It's transplant aftercare. Our partner, the St. Anna Children's Hospital, is the leading institute for pediatric leukemia in Austria. And what they do is they can, for a variety of reasons, transplant stem cells from donors to recipients. And you can do this, for instance, because people, in this case it's a children's hospital, so children have leukemia of various sources, but also for other reasons. One of the biggest problems is that because of this transplant, children have to be at home. They have to stay at home. They're very vulnerable. They're prone to get diseases. Their old immune system has been eradicated, so they're very vulnerable concerning bacteria. And of course, a big problem would be this graft versus host disease when the new immune system is rejected by the body. This can be life-threatening, and it can be really, really very dangerous. So what we need is compliance and communication, compliance to the medication that has been prescribed, to the type of physiotherapy that has been described, but also communication, because if something happens, if graft versus host disease, for instance, is coming, you have to be quickly admitted to the hospital. Now, the project had some kind of an evolution. This was the initial situation in the children's hospital. Children would go home, where they had to stay a year or longer, very often. They would write into a paper diary how they are doing, how they are feeling, about mental problems, about all kinds of organic problems. And when they go back to the hospital, they would bring the diary, and then the clinician would have this information. Now, about 10 years ago, we started the project Interact, which was developing a mobile solution for that. So children would have an app, and when they were at home, they would have all kinds of knowledge about what kind of medication do they need. They would have a game system where they would go on a fantasy island. They would have a daily story to read, and they would also communicate their daily bodily and physical and mental parameters to the clinicians in real time. After Interact closed, we started Ludic as a follow-up project, and I want to talk today about Ludic, which was kind of focusing on another question. So this is the Ludic team, just to show you these people, and Konrad was like at the center because it was his PhD thesis. So what is Ludic? Ludic is a cooperation between us and the St. Anna Children's Hospital, and we wanted to do research about the connection between game scores and health data. So when you play a game, you might hypothesize that the game scores that you generate, they have something to do with your health status. Now, if you look at children who have been transplanted, they can have really, really severe conditions. Some of them are so sick they can't even stand up. They cannot move. So it is obvious that when they are in this situation, they cannot really play a game or play it well. They can feel nausea, sickness. So here, for instance, all kinds of problems, concentration problems, nausea, tiredness, and overall feeling. And we wanted to design games that actually can measure that. So games as being a sensor in a healthcare scenario. So we designed a couple of games. One came out of Interact, and we designed the other ones for Ludic, where we would want to use the game as a sensor to measure these kinds of symptoms. And we would do that by running games that need, for instance, short-term memory, quick reactions that require concentration, and fine motor skills, for instance. Concerning the system architecture, that's nothing new. We have our database, the backend database. We have the app on the mobile phone, which is a Unity project, of course. And the backend and the app would also communicate by exchanging messages, and I will come to this later on. So we identified these two standards as suitable in order to be integrated in our Ludic app. So what about the games? So here we have a couple of games, so hopefully I can, of course I can't because it doesn't work. So this should be a video.
I think it was a video when you...
Was it?
Yes.
Okay. I can maybe duplicate it. Okay, so let's start. So this would be the first one. This was created also even for Interact. It's a simple numbers game. So you would have numbers in bubbles coming up, and you always have a very simple algebraic operation like plus, and then you would have an inverse problem. So for instance, which of these numbers add up to the desired goal, 6 for instance. So 3 plus 3 for instance would be the correct answer. So this would be Ansan, our numbers game. So here we have memory, which is kind of the memory, short-term memory game that we know. So you have to identify pairs of identical cards here. This was a juggling game, so you would have to make the ball fly up again. So by pressing to the ball. This game was not well received, and as we will see later on. But it's a kind of a game that tries to test a couple of quite important parameters. So here, concentration game, our Space Rider, which is simply a side scroller. You have to avoid stuff. As you can see, the games are quite simple. They're not meant to be like exaggerating or having super graphics. We kept them very simple for a purpose. So here, this is just for concentration. This one would be a fine motor game. So we call it path. So you have a ball that is rolling along this path. And by tilting the mobile phone, by using the sensors of the mobile phone, you can actually move the ball along the path. This would be then the daily health report. So we used, as I said, values from a standard. These are pretty simple categories, so that also children and young adolescents can actually understand them. So when we created this project, we had a couple of research questions. So first of all, we created these games. The games were designed with the help, of course, of the clinicians who told us what they want, what they are interested in, what are the typical problems of children after a stem cell transplant, what would be affected. And of course, our main concern was, are these games accepted by the target group? Are they usable? And are they willing, or would they be willing to use them on a longer term? So our hypothesis was, of course, that they would be well accepted by the target group. And in order to evaluate that, we carried out a couple of workshops. And the second research question, of course, was, can we use the game scores to predict health conditions? So we carried out another study. It wasn't a very long study, and I'll come back to this later on. So first, concerning usability and acceptance, we carried out the system usability study. We had 42 children, they were healthy children, and in a sequence of workshops, we explained to them what the project is about, the motivation and the purpose of the whole system. We explained them the mini games, how they can be played, and after that they had 30 minutes of playtime. We let them also fill out some questionnaires, of course, about the demographic data and about their gaming habits. And for each of the mini games, we also let them fill out a system usability scale questionnaire, which we have adopted a little bit, but we'll show this later on. For the questions where we actually used a 5-point Likert scale, we used a statistical test to determine whether there is general agreement to the proposed sentence, and everything that is either agree or highly agree is treated as agree. So we have a very simple binomial test that we can advise to test whether there is agreement or not. So this would be the adapted SUS questionnaire. We adapted it slightly in order to make it fit more to the context. Of course, we're talking about games, so we adapted it to the games context. Also, we made the question simpler because we're talking about children and young adolescents, so they might have problems with too complex sentences. So we used then these 10 questionnaire items and then used the normal afterward treatment of the scale to blow them up to a score between 0 and 100. So, if you can see, here we have the games on each row, and here we have the statistical, the quantiles of the SUS scale, which is between 0 and 100. As you can see, the median of most of them were actually pretty good. So on average, we had above average scores here, with the exception of soccer juggle, which was not accepted as much because children didn't really understand how that actually works. We also tested a couple of questions. So here, these are the answers to these questions. Here we would have a Likert scale, and then we can apply the binomial test in order to test whether there is agreement. Whenever you see this asterisk, there was a significant result, meaning that children would tend to agree here way above 50%. So there is a significant statistical significance here. So what would be the questions? The question here would be, I would like to report my health status through an app. So that was there was high agree on that. So children would very much agree on that. I play video games every day. That was a surprise for us, that this is not necessarily the case. So children do not, at least the children we asked, did not play every day. Maybe nowadays parents are more controlling with this regards. Some of them do, but certainly not all of them. So there was no significance in agreement here. I like playing video games. Yes, there is obviously high agreement here. I think it's a good idea to use video games as a therapy, and here we have a very high agreement. And this would be then how they would like to play these games on a daily basis. And again, we have here high agreement with a couple of these, with 3 of these games, and 2 of them they didn't like. So Soccer Juggle was not well received, and Ansan, which is the math game. So maybe playing a math game every day is not that much of a good thought for the children. We also asked them, again here we have the 5 games, which is the most fun and which is the least fun. And the most fun was the path game, which involves like a physical action, followed by memory, space, and then math and Soccer Juggle are at the end. Least fun here was Soccer Juggle again, obviously they really didn't want that. Okay. Here we had also a couple of open questions. What did you particularly like about Ludic? What did you dislike? These games would be nice. What would you add to Ludic? And this needs improvement, so we can have here a couple of answers. I like the design and graphics. I like the easy nature of the games. The games are very rich in variety here. I like the overall idea concept. 11 counts. So here you have the counts how often this was actually acquired. Yeah, a couple of others. I had great fun while playing the game. And here the controls of Soccer Juggle were inaccurate or the game was too difficult. So that was one of the feedbacks that we had for this type of game. Okay, concerning the health-related data, we incorporated two standards, the logical observation identifier names codes, or LOINC, which is meant to quantize lab data. So whenever a lab produces data, you can encode it with LOINC codes. And also as a general way to communicate these data, health level 7 FIRE standard. This standard is actually used for sending messages between legacy systems. So if you have some kind of a healthcare system and a laboratory system, they can communicate with each other, and this is done by messages, and this FIRE standard is now the de facto standard in order to facilitate these messages. You can encode it with XML or JSON or whatever. So we did a second study which lasted 2 weeks. We asked the children to report their health status. I've shown you the interface and also play the games daily. Unfortunately, because we had only these healthy children, the results were not statistically significant. We did not have access to the really ill children because they were kind of secluded because of the pandemic. And usually, of course, they're also secluded because they're really very vulnerable. So here we cannot, unfortunately, really say that we can conclude that this is really possible, but maybe at some day. So in conclusion, we can say that children do prefer digital solutions to a paper diary. Well, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Most like to play video games, but only 38% of them play every day. Most like the idea about therapeutical games and would recommend Ludic to peers. So that is a very nice result. Most SUS scores are good, except for Soccer Juggle. So there is something about this game that we really didn't like. And also, so we can say when you look at these two scores, I would play it when I'm chronically ill, and I would play it every day. Then these three games are actually really doing really well. And so these three games would be really a good candidate in order to use them in such a study. We would have to reject H1, so the acceptance for the math game and the Soccer Juggle. So we would have to come with something else in order to test these items. And unfortunately, we could not significantly show that there is a link between the game scores and health scores. We would need a much longer study and a much more control about what's happening, which we didn't have simply because of the pandemic. We couldn't have a kind of a controlled situation. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your attention. And
thank you, Helmut. Very interesting study. What questions do you have?
You did say you had very simple design of your games.
yes.
For what reason?
We were talking about also very small children, so we have quite an age range, and it's very difficult to come up with very complicated games and make them understandable and usable for very small children. Also, the games themselves shouldn't be too distracting. It's just a kind of a sensor that they should actually use. But it's a valid question.
Is the idea that they play these games as a sort of not quite so bad version of the paper diary, or is the idea that they would want to play these games in their own time?
Yeah, okay, that's also a good question. Of course, usually when you apply games, the hope is that children actually want to do that. And that was the initial idea, of course, also for the previous project. And in the previous project, we had a very sophisticated game system. So you could really level up characters, you could roam around islands, so that was really a huge play system. But of course, going in the long run, every game loses its attraction at some point. So I'm not so more convinced that for longer times you can really keep them motivated playing the same game. So it would make more sense to have a kind of variety and keep coming up with new games. So then you would have this kind of surprise, pleasant surprise, there is a new game, and that might keep them busy. So in my opinion, for the longer run, you would have to have some kind of a motivation with new content. Like if you have a free-to-play game, they have their ways to keep people interested in the whole system. New content, level ups, and things like that.
I have a short question for the soccer juggle, maybe I overheard it. If the children weren't able to control it because they didn't understand the controls, did you assist them or did you just let them try on their own?
Well, in this study, we had only healthy children, so they were supposed to be able to use them. We might have real children after stem cell transplant. They might be very sick, okay, but at least they should be able to play these games in some way.
I also mean if they don't understand it, because for me it looked like there was no clear indication that you have to kick the ball in the air. So if
we explained it to them, but of course children have not a long attention span, so maybe kind of. Children are also very explorative, so they tend not to listen to you, but they want to explore everything by themselves. I mean, men also like. Nobody reads the menu.
It's very tempting to let the ball kick.
Well, thank you very much. All right, our next paper.